Hello everyone, welcome to our special DawgNation Invasion recap as we look back on another day for the Georgia Bulldogs in Los Angeles, getting ready for the Rose Bowl coming up on January 1st. Hello everyone, my name is Brandon Adams. We are in downtown LA right now. You can see behind me the sun is starting to set. The day comes to a close here on the West Coast, and over the course of the next few minutes, we're going to spend some time looking at a lot of what happened for Georgia today. You get a chance to see some footage of Georgia on the practice field as the Dogs got back to work in a serious way in preparation for the Oklahoma Sooners. You get a chance to hear from a lot of the Georgia coaches and players, including offensive coordinator Jim Chaney coming up. We'll hear from Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm coming up. We'll hear from Georgia running back Sony Michel coming up here in just a moment as well. So it's a great way to kind of put a punctuation mark on another day for the Dogs, getting ready for the Sooners here. And I think that one thing is obvious when you look at the media covering this game, especially the media from outside the state of Georgia, what I like to call the DawgNation bubble, from folks kind of outside here. It is pretty clear that Georgia is a bit of a party crasher, if you will, to the college football playoff. Nationally, I think there is more known right now about the Oklahoma Sooners than Georgia. Oklahoma wants to pretend it's the underdog in this game or treat itself like the underdog in this game, but nationally, because of Mayfield having won the Heisman Trophy, there's a little bit more national notice being given to the Sooners. I think in the Sugar Bowl, both Alabama, who's a fixture of the college football playoff, they've been in all of them, Clemson, the defending national champions, maybe a bit more national attention paid to those programs as well. There is probably less known about Georgia nationally than known about the other three teams. Maybe even some Georgia fans themselves surprised by exactly how Georgia got to this point where it's practicing in Carson, California today, getting ready for the Rose Bowl. So with that in mind, I thought that one of the things that Sony Michel, the Georgia running back, said today that was really interesting when he met with the media was, if the rest of the country is somewhat surprised by the fact that Georgia's here in the college football playoff, when did Sony realize that that was a possibility for Georgia? When did he realize that this Georgia team, the final one he was going to play on, had a chance to be much better than the bowl teams he'd played on previously? Good Georgia teams, but not great. When did he realize that this Georgia team had a higher threshold than that? Thought Sony Michel gave a really interesting answer to that question when he spoke to the media today. Here's what Sony had to say.
It started off by the coaches. They set the standard high. And when I seen the younger guys, guys like Jake buying in and already trying to take over that leadership role, I knew this was a special team. When younger guys wanted to be leaders, when everybody wanted us to be great and reach that potential that coach wanted us to be, and that's when I knew this was a special team.
And, of course, for Georgia to live up to what Sony Michel thought when he saw those practices back during the spring and summer, Georgia having a chance to be a special team, they've obviously got to finish this one out in California this week and get ready to go beat the Oklahoma Sooners, earn a spot in the college football playoff national championship game. That's obviously the goal for Sony Michel and all of his Georgia teammates. And the Dogs were serious about getting back to work on that goal here today. We're going to take a moment here to show you some of the practice work that the Dogs were a part of. Of course, Georgia practicing in a town very near downtown Los Angeles. It's called Carson, California. The venue in which Georgia practices at is essentially on the same complex as the LA Galaxy, which is the MLS team. It's where they play their games. It's the temporary home of the LA Chargers. Of course, the Chargers moving from San Diego to LA. They've played their games there this season. It's the spot where Georgia practiced this week. Oklahoma also practicing in the same general vicinity there as well. And it's an amazing spot to watch practice unfold because the streets around the practice field lined with palm trees in every direction. It really, to a large degree, looks almost more like a resort area than it does an actual, football practice facility. But don't let the surroundings fool you. What was going on for Georgia, at least during the portion of the media you got a chance to see today, was all about business and all very serious work as the Dogs were very high tempo like always. The music was blaring. There was a fun atmosphere associated with the Georgia practice, but it was all about seriousness. It was all about getting to work. It was all about setting the tone that Georgia has really maintained all season long. And the one thing that you've heard a lot from Kirby Smart when he's had a chance to meet with the media and talk about what's going on with Georgia, there is an attitude that defines Georgia, I think, just as much as anything that's happened on the field in terms of the tangible results. There's an attitude that's sort of spoken to what Georgia's been able to accomplish this season. And the place where that attitude has really been sort of lived out and sort of set in motion is during practice. That was true during the fall months in Athens. I think that's true here during the the week leading up to the Rose Bowl in L.A. It's the practice field that sets the tone for Georgia. We clearly saw some of that from Georgia on the field here today. We'll look forward to seeing more of that throughout the week. We'll show you more of the practice footage coming up on our DawgNation Invasion recap show in just a moment. Of course, when you think about the work that Georgia is doing on that practice field, the work that it's trying to get done in terms of beating Oklahoma and getting past the Sooners, getting to a college football playoff national championship, one of the things that I think is central in that storyline, central in getting that done, is how you establish physicality. You know, the SEC brand of football, and there's been so much sort of said behind the scenes this week about the SEC way of football compared to the Big 12 way of football. Some Oklahoma players may be taking a little umbrage with the fact that once again they're being asked, can they match up with what is thought of as the more physical, more dominant SEC. Well, physicality is going to be the name of the game when it comes to what happens between these two teams when they meet on January the 1st. And when Jim Chaney spoke with the media today, the one thing that he laid out really in no uncertain terms is that it is that physicality. The team that can find the most of that, that's got the best chance of winning this game. That's what Georgia was obviously working at on the practice field today, and Chaney says that physical nature of the game is what's going to determine this one in the Rose Bowl when it's played. Here's Jim Chaney.
I think when you're sitting here and you're one of the final four teams that are playing, you can't win football games at this level of play without being a physical team. I'm sure the Oklahoma guys feel the same way that our guys do. They hang their hat on that. Physicality is a part of the game of football that most successful teams share, and I'm sure they share that also. I know that's an identity that we like to carry with us, and it's something we're proud of. We feel like we like to play football, and that's how we like to do it.
I think what you hear Jim Chaney talking about there is one of the reasons why a lot of Georgia fans have confidence growing as you get closer to this game, because they simply believe that Georgia, based on what it's done with its defensive line, its offensive line this season, is going to have what it takes to get this done in that spot. That while Baker Mayfield's a quarterback worthy of respect, while Oklahoma certainly does a lot of things well and maybe a little more of a physical team than some of the finesse-oriented Big 12 teams we've seen from the past, Oklahoma may sort of run against that stereotype to a certain extent. I think a lot of Georgia fans still believe that when push comes to shove, it's going to be Georgia doing more of the pushing and the shoving, and Georgia that opens up the kind of holes that are necessary for winning this game. We'll certainly see how that plays out. As promised, we'll show you more from Georgia practice here in just a moment. We'll also hear what a lot of Georgia players said from about Jake Fromm today and what Jake Fromm himself had to say as well. You're watching our DawgNation Invasion recap live from downtown L.A., looking back on a big day for the Georgia Bulldogs as they met with the media, got back to the practice field, and checked another day off the calendar as we get closer to the Rose Bowl on January the 1st as the Dogs look to knock off the Oklahoma Sooners. My name is Brandon Adams. Thanks so much for being with us here tonight. I'll remind you that we'll also have DawgNation daily tomorrow morning, starting at 10 a.m. live here from L.A. once again, so please make sure you check that out. I want to take some time here before we hear from Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm to hear from some of you, some of your questions and comments about what you've seen so far from Georgia, what's on your mind as we get closer to the Rose Bowl coming up on Monday. So we'll dive in with some of those as well here. Hal Love says, how about them Dogs? Oklahoma has got a chip on their shoulders about the SEC. Georgia's got a chip on its shoulders about Oklahoma, not a conference. The players were recruited by SEC schools too. So yeah, what Hal's referencing to there is this storyline that does seem to be present once again. A lot of Oklahoma players asked today, what's it like going up against the SEC? Is that something that you're thinking about? And those guys are talking about that. I know that a lot of the Oklahoma defenders, when they met with the media today, they were also talking about the notion that they're a bad defense because they play in the Big 12, a league that's all about the pace and all about the up-tempo passing, and they had to kind of push back on some of that. So, Hal says maybe Oklahoma has a bit of a chip on its shoulder. I think to a degree there is some chips on the shoulders of the Oklahoma players. Maybe Georgia's got some of that as well. You clearly see some of that, I think, restlessness start to emerge at this point. We're only a few days out from the game, and I think that both these teams are probably a little tired of talking about each other, maybe a little tired now of the long stretch of practices without getting to play, even in California. I think that's probably still true. Even with the sunny locale, practice is still practice. So I think there's probably a little bit of an edge that creeps in for both these teams here right now. Steve Walton says, how big does Oklahoma look? Do we compare in size and athletes? Who looks like the big dog? Well, Steve, we actually talked to Chip Towers about that for our Planning for the Opponent feature brought to you by Georgia United Credit Union that's up at DawgNation.com right now. One of the things that Chip said from his time going back to his visit to Norman, Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago is that when he saw the Oklahoma defense practicing, one of the things that came to his mind was it visibly did look to be smaller than what Georgia's brought to the table. So I think that Georgia does have the edge when it comes to 4- and 5-star recruits. Obviously, 4- and 5-star recruits typically means bigger players. And Chip says to the naked eye, it does appear that Georgia looks bigger than Oklahoma. So Chip was in Norman. That's what he got the impression when it comes to the dogs on that. So I think that's a really interesting question. Jake Frigo, let me scroll down and get Jake's comment here. Jake Frigo in the comment section. Actually, the comments. Yeah, here's Jake's comment. It says, it's crazy to think that this Georgia team will be the least talented team looking back in the next few years. And Jake's obviously referencing the amazing recruiting work Kirby Smart's done for the class of 2018, where it's currently ranked number 1 in the country in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team ranking. The 2019 class also sporting that kind of ranking as well. So clearly the recruiting work that's being done is paying dividends for the Dogs. And I thought it was interesting. Something else that Sony Michel said today, obviously a lot of folks give a lot of credit to the senior leadership for why Georgia's in the spot. One of the things that Sony made a point of talking about was also how some of the young players have kind of contributed to this as well. Those are also guys that are, at least from the class of 2016 and 2017, recruits that Kirby Smart has brought in. So there is an obvious line that can be drawn from recruiting success to on-field success. It's not always perfectly linear, but the teams that collect the most 4- and 5-star players are generally the ones that make trips to the college football playoff. Georgia's already seen that be true in 2017. There's a very good chance that that could be true in future years here as well. Of course, one of the biggest recruits to be brought under Kirby Smart's watch is the Georgia quarterback, Jake Fromm, who surprisingly became Georgia's starter after the injury to Jacob Eason in the Appalachian State game to start the year. Fromm came in that day, played admirably, had his first start against Notre Dame the following week, and really never looked back on his way to leading Georgia Bulldogs to an SEC championship and a spot in the Rose Bowl here on January the 1st. And, well, Fromm met with the media today. We'll get to hear from him in just a moment. But with Fromm speaking to reporters, a lot of reporters wanted to know from Georgia offensive coordinator Jim Chaney what he thought about Fromm and how he thinks that Fromm has handled his freshman season. Here's a little bit of what Jim Chaney had to say about that.
I think Jake's a good football player. He's got a good mind. He has a good football intellect about him. He come into our program with a good background. His high school program did a good job getting him ready. So it wasn't – he's a good player. When good players get the game of football, our job is just to try the hell out of the way, let them play football. And that's what we've been able to do, and Jake's been able to run with the ball. But, do they have freshman moments? Certainly they do. Do seniors have senior moments? Certainly they do. I can remember – long time ago playing in this game, and I had a senior quarterback playing for us that threw an interception against Ohio State that almost cost us the ball game, but he came back and righted a wrong. So it's been fun to watch him grow. When he makes mistakes, he owns up to them like we all do, and he's done a hell of a job.
I love the candid nature from Jim Chaney, the Georgia offensive coordinator there. Obviously, he's got a lot of respect for what he's seen from Jake Fromm. I think Fromm's earned that from Chaney over the course of the season. And, hey, it was refreshing to get a chance to hear from Chaney here today. I think one of the things that fans can appreciate about him is, and I know that from time to time Chaney has not been the most popular Georgia assistant, but one of the things I do think fans would like about Chaney, where they do hear more from him in the times he's spoken to the media, the one thing that is this is a relaxed guy. This is a guy who seems to have fun with football, and I've got to imagine that helps him relate to a freshman quarterback like Jake Fromm. And Fromm comes across like the coolest customer in the world when he's talking to the media or when you see him on the field, but behind the scenes, there has to be at least some nervousness, right? Has to be at least some degree of anxiety about doing a lot of this kind of stuff for the first time as the stage progressively gets bigger and bigger. You almost imagine that Chaney, being the sort of relaxed, easygoing guy that he is, maybe he helps instill some of that feeling into his quarterback, Jake Fromm, also, as Fromm has sort of navigated the waters of a true freshman season. Speaking of that, Chaney talked a little bit more about watching Fromm as a freshman, and really only a limited number of moments when he's ever even left to sort of scratch his head wondering what his quarterback was doing. Here's more from Coach Chaney.
I have a lot of confidence in Jake. He's a heck of a good football player. Heck, he keeps us on our toes as a coach. You're talking about starting your first game at Notre Dame. That's a heck of a deal. From then all the way through, I can only think about one time during the season that we had a little blemish that he acted like a freshman once in a while. That he's had a heck of a growth pattern from the beginning to the end. He's got complete ownership in what we're trying to get done offensively. He has our trust to change plays and do what we need to do to score enough points to win. So, heck, I don't know. I think he's grown at a rate that a lot of freshmen don't, and it's been fun to watch him do. He loves playing the game of football, and that shows up on the field every day at practice and in games. Been fun to watch him.
So obviously Jim Chaney likes what he's seen from his freshman quarterback, but how about Jake Fromm himself? His own assessment for what his season's been like. And some of the things that I heard from Fromm today, it's refreshing that he's willing to admit, you know what, this has been a wild ride. And I think he would even say that it's been a fun ride to go from where he was last year in Warner Robins, Georgia, playing for Houston County, all the way to now. Here's the calendar turns to January in the Rose Bowl with a shot of leading his Georgia Bulldogs to a national championship. It seems like he's having a lot of fun with all of this, which is kind of a cool thing to see because, listen, I mean, all of us would love to be in the spot where Fromm is as the quarterback on an SEC championship team. You at least want to be able to see those guys kind of enjoy it. It looks like Fromm's able to do that, and he's also able to kind of look back on where he's come throughout the course of this year, his own thoughts about the bumps and bruises that a freshman takes along the way to growing comfortable with an offense. Here's Fromm describing his own freshman season.
There's definitely been a couple, during the year. I remember, Notre Dame having that fumble, kind of in the middle of the game, and I had to own up to it, and just kind of come back from it. And then Tennessee, I remember that game, just for whatever reason, it's just super loud there, and just kind of didn't play as well as I wanted to. But Sony and Nick and Isaiah, man, those guys, they really keep me my head straight, and man, they really helped me a lot. So they've been really good to me and help keep me kind of level-headed.
And you hear Fromm's description there of what he's been through this season, and you understand why so many Georgia players have grown to trust this guy this season, really call that guy their quarterback. And while they're not going to admit this publicly, I mean, we all understand this. This is one of those things that just easier said than done, right? Trust is built up slowly over time, and I'm sure for a lot of the Georgia players who maybe at the end of their careers, when they found out a freshman quarterback was going to be the guy they were entrusting their offense to, maybe there was a little trepidation there. Maybe there's a little nervousness about what Fromm may be able to provide this team. But Fromm has clearly won those guys over. The tight end Jeb Blazevich talked about exactly how it was that Fromm won him over and how it was that Fromm came to display the kind of leadership that Blazevich wanted to play for and play with. Here's the Georgia tight end.
I feel like he just is who he is. He came in day one being the same guy that you see now. And like I've said before, it's hard when you're with guys every day really to see the drastic improvements that they make just because it's little by little throughout a long period of time. So I feel like it wasn't until he was in the moment that we're like, wow, all right, this is him. He's been doing this for a while, and it's not until you go back to, I guess, spring ball film and really realize, like, oh, we've all come a long way, him included.
No doubt what Blazevich says there rings true, and he's not the only Georgia player to feel that way. Nick Chubb also was very complimentary of Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm today, and someone else who really weighed in on exactly what Fromm means to him was the Georgia left tackle Isaiah Wynn. And Wynn's the kind of guy that's very important for a freshman quarterback to win over, because Wynn, in many ways, is the leader of the Georgia offensive line. He's capable of playing all positions. He's played just about every single one of them, at least in some form or fashion, during his Georgia career. And much like Blazevich impressed with Jake Fromm as a leader, Isaiah Wynn echoes those sentiments. He feels the same way.
For me, I definitely believe that the time that I really took note that he was filling in that leadership role pretty well was doing 7-on-7 during the summertime. I mean, it was just obvious that he was just different as opposed to some other players. He always made sure that everybody was matching his intensity. He always came out there with the right intensity. So that definitely was a point in time where I was like, yeah, he's definitely going to be a great player.
I've said before that I can't guarantee you that Georgia's going to win the Rose Bowl against Oklahoma. Obviously, the Sooners are a formidable opponent. There's no denying that. But the one thing I do believe that I can guarantee is that if Georgia loses, Jake Fromm won't be the reason why. Fromm is a quarterback that, much like most of you, I would say, I've grown to trust, and I've grown to believe that while he won't match necessarily Baker Mayfield throw for throw, he is capable of being the architect of an offense, the leader of an offense that can certainly match Oklahoma point for point in this game. I've said it before, we'll keep saying it. I believe the winner of this game gets into the 30s. I believe the loser does not. We know the Georgia defense is capable of shutting anyone down on its best day, and it may need its best day to shut down the Oklahoma offense. But the Georgia offense being able to keep pace, being able to be led by Jake Fromm to score enough points to win this game, I certainly believe that's a possibility. And I believe that as units go, the Georgia offense is probably a little underrated coming into this game, and I think that Fromm is a big reason why. All right, as promised, before we get ready to wrap up here, want to take a couple minutes to hit some of your comments, give you a chance to kind of weigh in on what you saw today, either from the stuff at DawgNation.com, what you've heard about the Georgia practices, or maybe questions you have as we lead into more coverage this week here live from L.A. Kevin Story says, yeah, I trust Jake Fromm. And Kevin, that's good to hear. I think that Fromm is certainly set up for success here in this game. Philip Jordan Wells says Nick is so anti-media. I love it. I think he's referencing Georgia running back Nick Chubb, and it really was funny today watching a lot of the out-of-town media, or maybe it was like local L.A. media, but folks kind of outside the DawgNation bubble, they're trying to ask Chubb their questions. And Chubb is just not playing ball and stuff like that. We were actually talking about before he came on the air here, some of the sort of strange questions you get asked during these long marathon media sessions. And listen, Chubb's polite. He'll look you in the eye, but he's not going to give you a whole bunch of words for a question that he does not want to answer. And obviously, Georgia fans have been aware of that for a long time. He's the kind of guy that does his talking on the field a lot more than he does his talking in press rooms. But I think a lot of the national folks became acquainted with that today for maybe the first time. So that's pretty funny stuff. Lael Sales says, good grief, the Georgia defense is a beast. Oklahoma hasn't seen anything like it. That is true. I think it's also true that Georgia hasn't seen anything like the Oklahoma offense either. This is a different brand of offense than you see in most areas of the SEC. I think Georgia has faced good offenses this season, shut down Auburn in the SEC championship. That's certainly a feather in the cap of the Dogs, but Mayfield and the Sooners, Lincoln Riley, a terrific play caller, they do have to be respected here. It is one of those great matchups of two dominant units. What Georgia's done defensively, what Oklahoma's done offensively. There's a reason why that matchup's being hyped the way that it is, because you do see two outstanding brands of football, very different, mind you, but outstanding brands of football coming from both of those teams. Matt Donaldson says that Fromm is David Green all over. That's an interesting comparison. Of course, Green the left-hander, Fromm the right-hander. I think a lot of people have also said that Fromm looks a lot like Aaron Murray, wearing that number 11, similar build. But either way, whether you want to go Aaron Murray or David Green as the comparison, that's some pretty rarefied air. For Murray, the record-setting quarterback, for David Green, the SEC champion, I think Fromm would probably take either one of those two comparisons for sure. Al Clements says, I feel like Davin Bellamy's going to be a huge factor in the Rose Bowl. We know how big Bellamy came up in the Notre Dame game, getting the sack on Brandon Wimbush that sealed that deal for the Dogs. That was very much a bowl game type feeling because of how many Georgia fans had traveled to South Bend for that game. Wouldn't it be fitting if, in many ways, the way that Georgia's season began with that trip to Notre Dame and the Davin Bellamy sack that clinched that game, if a similar moment occurred in this game, that's a kind of a nice thought for a lot of Georgia fans to have. David McNair says Fromm is special, no doubt. Yeah, there is certainly a special feeling that you get from him. Will Scott speculating about why Baker Mayfield may have missed his trip to Disneyland. I'll leave that kind of stuff alone. I'll let y'all handle that. I'll leave that alone. Let me scroll back to the top and get a couple more comments, then we'll get ready to get out of here. Keith and Leslie Pike talking about Davin Bellamy also, like we mentioned before, but also Lorenzo Carter, about how Carter is going to be essential to how the defense slows down Oklahoma. And I think that how Lorenzo Carter is used in this game is going to be incredibly interesting. Carter is the guy that, as many of y'all are aware, can rush the quarterback, but also oftentimes drops back in pass coverage. Even plays the nickelback position for Georgia a lot because of how versatile he is as a defender. How do you use Carter in this game? Now, I know a lot of Georgia fans instinctively say, you got to rush the pass with that guy. You got to get out to the quarterback. Carter's great at that, can be great at that, and you need to put Mayfield on his back to win this game. And instinctively, I almost want to say the same thing, but then you realize also that sending a lot of pressure towards Mayfield, does open up wider passing lanes for him to throw into. And a guy like Carter, who can be great in coverage and has the big wide wingspan to knock balls out of the air, maybe having him drop back in coverage is a better way, a more effective means for limiting what Mayfield's able to do. I think that's a really compelling conversation and an interesting debate on both sides for Dog fans as we get closer and closer to this game. Stephen Burton says, does Baker Mayfield being sick make a difference? I don't think it does, because Mayfield was back at practice today. Now, I did see where, and this is kind of interesting maybe, John Shin, who you may remember was on DawgNation Daily on our Christmas Day episode of our program. He covers Oklahoma for diehards.com. He said that it appeared that Baker Mayfield was throwing the ball effectively during practice today, but did look to be getting over the flu. So I don't know exactly what it was that Mayfield was doing that made Shin tweet that out, but I did notice that. So maybe a little bit of a lingering sickness here, but I don't think anyone takes what Mayfield may have been dealing with over the last 24 hours, or I guess 36 hours if you want to be more specific. I don't think anyone takes that to mean that Mayfield's going to be limited in the Rose Bowl. So from that standpoint, I don't think it's a legitimate storyline, but obviously Mayfield's absence at Disneyland, the fact that our reporter close to the Oklahoma program said it looked like he may be getting over the flu, that's obviously going to get some attention because he's the Heisman Trophy winner. Eric Moody, pretty funny line there on Mayfield as well. Cameron Balding says, how about a quarterback spy on Mayfield and cover the middle of the field, 2 turnovers, and we get the W? Yeah, I mean, what you do in the middle of the field I think is going to be crucial here. And, you're tempted to put that spy on Mayfield, but then you got to remember that, Oklahoma's got a very good running game. And if you're already in nickel coverage, now you're spying Mayfield. That's a lot less bodies, true linebackers to focus on what's happening with the Oklahoma running game there. And obviously a big part of what the Oklahoma offense likes to do, those RPO sort of, I call them pop passes. I don't know what the official name is, where it's the fake handoff and then dumping over the head of a linebacker right in front of a defensive back. I mean, Mayfield's really good at that, and you can only play with 11, and he certainly gives you a lot to think about with how you want to use your 11. Al Clement says Mayfield's going to have to be able to throw on the run since he's a little short of 6 feet. And obviously, Georgia fans would love to see that defense put Mayfield on the run all day long. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. on another episode of DawgNation Daily, live from Los Angeles. The sun will be coming up as we're doing our show here on the West Coast. We'll look forward to bringing you more sights and sounds from what happened for Georgia on the practice field the upcoming day ahead as we head towards a really fun weekend as the Dogs put the finishing touches in their game plan to get ready for Oklahoma. Love hearing from UGA fans about their own plans, whether you're watching it on TV somewhere around DawgNation or making your way towards California here by the end of the week. We're looking forward to kind of being the headquarters for all the conversation here with our special DawgNation Invasion recaps that we'll do for you nightly. Of course, DawgNation Daily coming at you once again at 10 a.m. Eastern Time right here on the DawgNation Facebook page and in podcast form, by the way, for those of you that like listening to the audio version of the show. We'll get ready to sign off for now. Thanks so much for being with us. Make sure you check out DawgNation.com for plenty more coverage from Seth Embers and Chip Towers. They've both been all over the scene today here in L.A. as well. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon.